On this show, we're going to take a step back and provide some context to the news. We want to introduce you to real folks beyond the headlines who present a more nuanced picture of what this country is really about. So those stories are the ones you can expect from us each week. In this first edition, we take a look at the secret effort by the FBI to track Black activists. They're reportedly labeling them Black identity extremists and monitoring their activity. Is there a real threat? Or are the feds just engaging in good old racial profiling? We're going to talk with our correspondent, Aaron Morrison, who spoke with Rakem Balagun, a man who was jailed after the FBI pursued him for supposed terrorism under this designation.
We're just regular working class individuals who's just using our rights as a way to influence our community. Our goal is not to rely on white people when hit the fan. We want to be able to rely on ourselves.
I'm in Dallas looking into a secret surveillance program on Black activists. Last year, we learned the FBI was looking into potential threats they call Black identity extremists. The FBI report claims, quote, perceptions of police brutality against African Americans spurred an increase in premeditated, retaliatory lethal violence against law enforcement and will very likely serve as justification for such violence. The report has been alarming to activists and civil rights experts who fear it could be used to target people for their race and political beliefs. Now I'm going to meet with Rakem Balagun.
Where is it?
Reportedly the first person prosecuted under F.B.I. and held for 5 months before the case against him fell apart. The FBI raided his home in December 2017. Rakem?
Yes.
Hey, Aaron Morrison.
Hey, nice to meet you, man.
You too.
Please come in.
As you've gone through this case, you've been able to see what the government is actually saying. Can you, remember what they said you said in court?
They said that they made reference to a post I made on Facebook that stated one man named Michael X brought the whole Dallas Pig Department to his knees, protesting police terrorism, and I stand with him.
The FBI was concerned that Balagun might carry out an attack against police, similar to the one carried out by Micah Xavier Johnson.
Police say 25-year-old Micah Johnson, a vet, planned his mass murder after hearing reports of 2 black men shot dead by police earlier this week.
Chaos erupting on the streets of Dallas at 9 p.m.
We got a guy with a long rifle. We don't know where the hell he's at.
The BIE label was reportedly created after Johnson's attack.
They used that post as a way to say that I'm encouraging other people to, attack law enforcement and things of that nature.
So you're not saying that you would ever advocate or encourage people to actively go out and kill cops. What you're saying is you understand why
I wouldn't advocate that unless it's for reasonable self-defense.
Can you see why people might construe, or in this case misconstrue, what your intent is by the way you characterize Micah X. Johnson?
Yes, I can see why people could misconstrue that. I do have the First Amendment right to express my opinion. I have the First Amendment right to support someone who possibly killed somebody, and I have the First Amendment right to not empathize with the death, just like everybody else in this country do.
The reason why Balagun was arrested caused controversy among criminal justice experts. The FBI thought Balagun had weapons he shouldn't have because of a prior domestic assault charge. But in May, a judge ruled that was wrong.
The only thing the prosecution had and the FBI had to justify holding him was his political activities and his online rhetoric. And that struck me as an attempt to punish him for his political activity rather than to protect the public from any kind of security threat.
The FBI first started looking into Balagun, whose real name is Christopher Daniels, after he was seen in an InfoWars video at an open carry rally against police brutality in 2015.
Same old again.
He was protesting with his group, Guerrilla Mainframe.
You know, you don't have to hold them. You just hold them normal, bro. Yeah, you know, like how I'm just holding like this. I just don't want you looking like a crazy nut. You still talking like that. You know, like Guerrilla Mainframe is a community organization that started in 2008. It started with the conversation, the questions of dealing with poverty and dealing with the over-policing of those communities as well. We train in firearms. You know, we use the firearm as a microphone. I know it sounds crazy, but you know, you get a black man walking around with guns in a public area, you'll be surprised, you know, how many cameras will follow up eventually. And so, you know, we use that as an opportunity to get our message and our voice out about the injustice that's going on in our community.
This story actually raises a lot more questions for me. Fortunately, I've got the reporter with me, Aaron Morrison. He does a lot of reporting for Mike on social justice issues and is the one that brought us Rakem's story. So do you think that there are legitimate threats from some of these black activist groups?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, you can, if you ask anybody in the law enforcement community, or most people in the law enforcement community, they would say at the rise of Black Lives Matter in 2014, most police officers or beat cops felt like there was a threat of violence against them because of some of the rhetoric that were used at protests. But they can only really point to a very few number of cases where violence has actually been carried out against police officers by black groups.
He made that comment about the police, you know, saying that they got what they deserved after those police in Dallas were shot. I mean, should the FBI be monitoring people who make statements like that on Facebook?
Well, if you ask experts, criminal justice experts, they say, well, technically, he engaged in constitutionally protected speech. So even if your speech is not palatable, like saying that officers who were brutally murdered in the streets of Dallas deserve what they got, even if you say something like that, technically that is constitutionally protected speech.
What exactly does black identity extremism mean? What is this label?
Well, if I was to put it in the most simplest terms, it means if you're black, have an affinity for your race, and are upset about police shootings, then you could be considered a threat, a violent threat to the public. The term black identity extremist is new, but it's kind of not, because you can go back to the 60s and remember that the FBI is really infamous for surveilling and targeting Malcolm X and Martin Luther King and the Black Panthers. And sometimes that targeting and the use of informants to infiltrate those movements led to violent attacks and even assassinations against some black activists.
And what about, you've actually reached out to the FBI for a comment on Rakem's case to see if they were using that label on him? What did they say?
They actually declined to comment because it is still an ongoing investigation. But what we can surmise based on the facts of the case is that it really seems like they did label him a threat.
What kind of impact has this the label black identity extremism had on other black activist groups like the Black Lives Matter groups?
Well, for them, it's been the clearest indication that there is a real sort of effort to not only track and surveil black activists or Black Lives Matter activists, but that there are consequences for their outspokenness outspokenness against law enforcement.
So we know there's been a rise in white nationalist groups. What is the federal government doing to handle that problem?
Well, we know as soon as the Trump administration came in, they changed a program that funded grassroots groups that are working to de-radicalize white nationalists. They took away this fund and changed it. It was initially called the Countering Violent Extremism program, and now it's called the Countering Violent Islamic Extremism program. And so that certainly narrows the focus. But in addition to that, the Trump administration, or rather President Trump, pardoned the men who carried out an armed occupation of a wildlife refuge in Oregon. And before that, Trump pardoned Sheriff Joe Arpaio in Arizona, who was widely known to be a blatant racist and really treated immigrants very poorly.
So are you saying then that you see that the federal government is handling this issue of hate groups differently based on race and religion?
All evidence points to that, yeah.
Aaron, thank you so much for coming and answering the questions and for following the story. We look forward to more of your reporting. Now we're going to turn back to Rakem's story.
All right, so boom, let's go. Since the raid, my son has been very different. I think he suffers from post-traumatic stress. Keep in mind, when they bust in our door, it was an element of surprise. We were asleep and at peace. And ever since that moment, we have not been able to gain our peace back. I'll use this left hand here to, then boom, right there. Now, this is how it looks in full speed. So he's here, boom. So let's say he's coming for a Jason style slash. I want you to hold the knife tight. My son, I want him to know how to defend himself from, people in his community and people outside his community. Also, I want him to be able to have the mindset of be willing to defend others. Because then if I go here.
Right. So like the slam you just did, you might, oh, that looked like it hurt. Everything is not gonna be soft, You might have to fight on concrete. You might go to the ground on concrete, and it's gonna hurt. But you have to be conditioned, mentally tough to deal with that.
Do you ever worry about your dad and some of the things that he's involved in?
If you have political education, you'll know that a lot of activists has been in prison and falsely criminalized, for their activity as far as in the community. So, of course, it's a daily worry.
Appreciate you taking me short notice, big time. All of this is due to me being arrested and labeled as a terrorist by the F.B.I. about 6-7 months ago. For the simple fact that, one, I'm not a terrorist and never done anything terroristic.
Obviously now you're navigating being out of prison, having spent 5 months there. What's it been like?
I've lost my job, my apartment, my car. I lost, the cohesiveness of my family and my children. And so, every day is just a day of me trying to slowly regain that. If the federal government can go out their way to do all this to, mess up, then they should go out their way to make it right. One of the things I can say, from dealing with this situation, is always be prepared when you're working as an advocate for the best interest for your community, which may not be in the interest of the United States government, to always be prepared for some type of backlash. Yes, thank you. Looks pretty good, doesn't it? Good to go. You got the same exact thing I got? Okay. I hope to live in a society where the federal government would actually work for the best interests of the people, not work in interest of oppressing people. This is what I plan on embarking on in the future. We're going to continue to keep our foot on the gas and keep moving forward.
And that's it for this episode of Mike Dispatch. Let us know what you think by commenting on our show.